So about a year and a half ago, I posted a video going over my wall-mounted tablet dashboard, and that video absolutely blew up and currently sits at almost 500,000 views at the time of recording, which is just insane. So thank you all so much for all of the positive feedback on that video. But since then, I've made some pretty significant changes to the design and functionality of the dashboard and figured it was probably time for an update. So here we are. I've also linked the updated GitHub repository in the description below, and I'll go over how to get that set up here in a minute. But first, what's new? The most notable design changes come in the way the cards are displayed because I wanted to make something a little more interesting than solid black tiles on a solid black background. I played around with choosing a color and theming the UI elements according to that color, but I ended up getting sick of it after like a week. I wanted something a little more transparent. A few days later, I came across Adam's visionOS and liquid glass theme, and right away I knew I needed to give it a try. I ended up merging the theme I was using at the time with Adam's theme, and this was well, no, this wasn't the result, that's the screensaver. This was the result. I have to say, it wound up looking a lot better than I expected it to. Okay, so layout-wise, it hasn't really changed. You've still got the sidebar on the left-hand side, 5 different sections for lights, devices, etc., and 5 buttons here on the bottom that open pop-ups. Although you might have noticed that some of the buttons inside of the sidebar look a little different, and that's because I'm actually using bubble card for these instead of mushroom cards. This isn't saying that mushroom cards are bad in any way, I just thought the bubble cards looked a little bit better with the rounded off design that I was kind of going for. And the functionality of the sidebar buttons have also changed a little bit, so up here, I've got some temperature and humidity graphs. This allows me to glance at the past 24 hours of data without having to go into the entities more info page, which is really useful. And of course, I can tap on the card to see the entities more info page and some more precise data as well. Also, you may notice throughout this video that this tablet is running very slowly. No idea why that's happening. It's only 2 years old. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't happen on any of my other devices as well, so don't let that discourage you from using this dashboard. But if you happen to know what may be causing this, feel free to let me know down in the comments because I've not been able to figure out. Anyways, under the graphs, I've got the lights counter that tells me how many lights are on. I've also got a nights and / sheet change counter that I can quickly reset by clicking on this button right here. I went over how to create this in a short that I posted this past February, so go check that out in the description if you're interested. And of course, I've got some quick actions right here, one that I can use to turn my motion sensor on and off. I've also got a button here that allows me to turn my fan automation on and off, so if the temperature of the room crosses the temperature that I set here, my ceiling fan will automatically turn on. Really nice. And then down here, I've got a button that opens a pop-up for my wake-up automation. It should at least. There we go. Yeah, see, the lag is really bad on here. I don't know what's going on. So I've got a button up here that allows me to turn the automation on and off. I can also set the time that the fade on will start. I can change the mode, I can set the duration, and I can also tell Home Assistant to only run this automation once. So yeah, really convenient to have all these options here and not have to go into the automations panel, change all this stuff. And then of course down here in the corner, I've got a weather card. I redesigned it slightly to work with the rest of the dashboard. Now of course the functionality of these hasn't changed really at all. I'll still go over it for anyone new. You can tap to turn something on and off, and you can double tap to access the more info page. Maybe, possibly. I think it only works on lights. Okay, so the more info double tap only works on lights. One thing that's new though is I actually added a second section of devices that can be accessed by swiping to the right. And this is nice because I don't have to squeeze a bunch of buttons into one tiny little space. Then I also added a very subtle jiggle animation that gets activated whenever you press a button. Again, might not be noticeable on here because of the lag, but yeah, I promise it's there. And then down here in the bottom left corner, I've got a completely new, redesigned HomePod / media player card. Now this was designed entirely from the ground up, no borrowed code, nothing like that. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the way it turned out. So we've got quick controls for power, volume, skipping between tracks, and we've got play and pause. The album art gets displayed as the background, and you can tap anywhere on the card to get to the more info page. Maybe. There we go. So yeah, I've also redesigned the bottom buttons to use bubble card pop-ups instead of browser mod pop-ups because I personally just like the way those look better. So first button here, scenes, it just opens up to a grid of a bunch of scenes, nothing too crazy. Second button here shows me any available updates. The third button allows me to quickly see out of the tablet's front camera, which does not appear to be working right now. The fourth button allows me to quickly access controls for the tablet itself, so like power, brightness, charger, a bunch of other stuff. This is useful for debugging. And then the final button right here just opens up to a bunch of nerdy system stats that I may need to access at some point in time. I can't remember the last time I used this stuff, but it's here in case I need it. I can also restart Home Assistant or the virtual machine. So yeah, just useful to have this stuff without having to actually log in. And as in the previous video, I am still using wall panel to display the dashboard, even though it is deprecated. And yeah, that's just about it. Let's get on with the installation. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is head on into the updated GitHub repository in the description below. Again, if you followed along with my dashboard videos in the past, this will be very familiar, pretty much the exact same process. And also the original dashboard from last year is still available, but I will be, of course, covering the new dashboard in this video because that's what this video is about. So the first thing you're going to want to do is at the top here, click on the green code button and then choose download zip. And then once that's finished, go ahead and double click to extract it. On most systems, this should happen automatically. And then once it's done extracting, you're going to get a folder containing the files for both the old dashboard and the new dashboard. Again, I'm only going to be covering the new dashboard in this video, so you can just leave the old files alone for now. The next thing that you're going to need to do is actually set up the weather icons. Now, I did mention that I created a new weather card for this dashboard, and they feature some animated icons, which I personally think look really nice, but you do need to actually add these icons manually because they're not in stock Home Assistant. Also, I should mention that if you followed along with my mobile dashboard guide that I did last summer, you are gonna already have these icons set up correctly and you can skip this step. I'll have a time somewhere on the screen that tells you where to skip to. I would also strongly recommend that you use the Samba Share add-on for this. You can use File Editor, but Samba Share just makes it significantly easier and less painful. But if you don't already have it installed, I wouldn't go about installing it specifically for this, as it is a little bit complicated to get set up. I am going to be using Samba Share in this video because that's just what I'm used to, but if you are going to be using File Editor, I've put step-by-step instructions on how to do that in the GitHub repository, so you can just go and check that out and follow along with those steps instead. Okay, so to get this going, the first thing you're going to want to do is connect to your Home Assistant server via your computer's network storage feature. This does vary by system, so if you're not entirely sure how to do it, just search up how to connect to network drive on whatever operating system you're using. So on Mac, this is going to be Command K, and you can see it already populates up here because I've used it before. I can just go ahead and hit enter. No, I'm not showing you guys my password. Why would I do that? And then mount the config volume. And then once you're connected, scroll down and find the www folder at the bottom. And then from another window, you're going to want to go ahead and drag and drop the weather icons folder into the www folder on your Home Assistant instance. And then once that finishes copying over, go ahead and click into the folder and make sure all of the icons got added. There should be 25 icons in total. Alright, next up, back in the GitHub download, you're going to want to go ahead and find the frosted glass dashboard theme.yaml file. And then while you're still connected to your Home Assistant server, go ahead and find the themes folder. If you don't have this folder, just create it, name it themes, all lowercase. And then I've got a snippet of code in the GitHub repository that you're going to need to add to your configuration.yaml. Trust me, it's not that hard. But if you do already have this folder, then you're all good to go. So you can go ahead and click inside of there. And then what you're going to want to go ahead and do is drag the frosted glass dashboard theme.yaml file into the themes folder on your Home Assistant instance. If you're using File Editor, you're going to want to go up to the Browse File System, choose Upload File, click on the File button, and then in the GitHub download, find the frosted glass dashboard theme file. It might not show the whole name, but you can kind of assume it based on the last couple of letters, as you can see right there. And then once you're done with that, go on over to Developer Tools, Actions, and then search for the Reload Themes action and run it. Okay, now that all the prep work is done, it's finally time to actually create the dashboard. So before you get started on anything, I've listed all of the custom components you're going to need to install in the GitHub repository, so just make sure you have all of these installed, otherwise things may not work. Also, make extra sure that you've installed the layout card custom component because this is the backbone of the entire dashboard, and without it, nothing is going to work. None of the cards are going to load. You're not even going to be able to edit it at all. So this is very, very important. I got a lot of questions about this last time, so I figured I needed to make it extra clear. And once you've verified you've got all the required custom components installed, go over to Settings, Dashboards, and create a new dashboard from scratch. You can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to name this test-for-video, as I always do in these videos. Click on Create, and then open the new dashboard. It might show up in your sidebar, it might not, so I'm sure you know how to get to it. And then in the GitHub repository online, not in the download, go to the frosted glass dashboard config.yaml file. At the top right here, choose copy raw file. And then in Home Assistant, click on the pencil icon right up here, the 3 dots, choose raw configuration editor, delete any lines that are in there, and then paste in the configuration file from GitHub. And then make sure you scroll to the bottom and check that all of the configuration got pasted in. You see mine has 3,039 lines of code, and then at the top right, choose save. And then to add the background image to the dashboard, click on the pencil icon right up here next to the view name, go to the background tab, and then in the GitHub download, go ahead and drag the background.jpg file into the drop zone in Home Assistant like so. You can adjust the opacity down here, the background size, you can play around with all these options if you want, and then choose save when you're done, and the background is now added. Okay, now comes the fun part, replacing all of my entities with yours. So again, if you followed along with any of my dashboard videos in the past, you'll know that right when you paste the configuration file in, nothing is going to work at all because all of my entities are specified in the configuration and not yours, and most likely my entities do not exist on your Home Assistant instance. So again, naturally mine looks normal because it found all of my entities on my own Home Assistant instance, but yours is not going to look anything like this right off the bat. It's just going to be freaking out with errors. What you are going to want to do is for each card that has an error on it, click on the edit button, and then in the card configuration where it says entity, change the entity to an entity on your Home Assistant instance and not what's originally in there. This is a very, very time-consuming process. This is what takes the longest out of all of the steps in these videos, but trust me, it's all worth it in the end. This is also a good time to point out that the HomePod cards and the sidebar are actually 2 cards layered on top of each other. So to edit the top layer, you can just go and click on the edit button like usual, but in order to edit the bottom layer, you're going to need to first remove the top layer. So to do this, click on the 3 dots on the card, choose cut, and then now you can click on the edit button for the bottom layer, make any changes you want to, and then once you're done with that, go ahead and click add card here in the bottom right, choose paste from clipboard, and then save, and it'll automatically lock back into position because the card's location is specified within the configuration. I also really cleaned up the configuration file this time around. I removed a ton of button card templates that just were not necessary for this dashboard, so it should be a lot easier to work with. Ideally, you shouldn't have to access the main configuration file because everything is accessible via the normal user interface, but if you do, it should be a lot more manageable. There's one more thing I want to cover before we wrap up here, and that is the time here on the top left. Now, by default, the date and time are going to look like this, but if you want to change it to have, say, the 12-hour time displayed instead of the 24-hour time, or you want to display the name of the day of the week, or the name of the month, or something along those lines, you're going to need to configure a couple of extra sensors because Home Assistant doesn't provide this data natively, at least not within templates. And I've got all of this stuff in the GitHub repository, so all of the template code, so all you need to do is just copy and paste these into your Home Assistant instance, and I've got instructions on how to get these set up as well, so you should be all set there. And these are really useful if you want to achieve something like this, where it's the 12-hour time and the name of the day and the name of the month, so something like what I use, but if you don't really care and just want to leave it like this, then obviously that's fine too. And that just about does it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content from me. Also, if you have any questions or are struggling to get this working over on your end, feel free to put a comment down below or open an issue in the GitHub repository. I'm going to try to be a little more on top of responding to those this time around. And I also added some frequently asked questions both from last time and just questions that I think may come up frequently in the GitHub repository, so you can check those out as well. Otherwise, that's just about it for this video, and I'll see you next time.